After dodging my two nieces who were trying to push me into the pool but ended up falling in themselves, chaos ensued. Most of the other guests found it hilarious, but their moms, who were pretty drunk, freaked out. Since I wasn't dressed for swimming, I stepped away from the pool and let others rescue the kids. My intoxicated sisters and their husbands started yelling at everyone, including me, for spoiling their fun. They were also upset because the kids had dropped their parents' phones into the pool while filming the failed prank. One of my brothers-in-law tried to retrieve the phones from the pool, but his size made it impossible. No one else volunteered to help, probably because my sisters were still yelling and cursing. I reminded my sisters that it was their responsibility to watch their kids, and if anything happened, it was on them, not me. There were heated arguments, and my wife and I decided to leave, especially after another brother-in-law stumbled and fell face first onto the concrete. After we left, the party ended on a sour note. My drunk brother-in-law, who had fallen and injured his face while yelling at me, had to go to urgent care to get stitches. Since he was too intoxicated to drive, my dad had to take him, and he was not happy about it. Later that evening, my sister started a group text and said some really nasty things about my wife and me, calling me the Ardu, real winner, and their husbands added some hurtful comments too. My wife and I decided to block the four of them. My mom called me, upset about what was said, and my parents insisted that my sisters and brothers-in-law come over the next day, without their kids, to sort things out and establish some ground rules. The result was a half-hearted apology from the nieces. Thinking things were settled, I unblocked them that evening. However, I received a text from one of the brother-in-laws demanding payment for the $750 phones. I replied saying I wouldn't be paying and forwarded his message to my parents, stating that we were done with the nonsense and going no contact with my sisters and their spouses, refusing any future invitations if they would be present. I then blocked them again. This triggered a major confrontation. Dad called them and gave them a piece of his mind. Among other things, he told them that the grandkids were not welcome at their place indefinitely, since my mom often provided free babysitting, which shook them up. He also banned them from using the vacation house, a big deal since they frequently stayed there. My dad dropped a bombshell on my sisters and brothers-in-law. My wife and I actually owned the vacation house, not my parents. This news shocked them because both their families frequently used the place, even inviting friends for weekend getaways. It was unlike my parents to assert ownership like this, indicating they had reached their limit. For context, I never wanted my sisters to know about our ownership of the house. We bought it for my parents, who had always dreamed of having a mountain retreat. Keeping our ownership quiet was a way to avoid drama with my siblings. A couple of days later, my sisters and their husbands showed up unannounced at our place to apologize in person. However, we were out to dinner, so they left a note. One sister also called me at work, but I sent her to voicemail, as I was prepared to cut off contact with them. However, things took a turn for the worse. I recently discovered that my oldest sister and her husband, who have 3 kids, have been living beyond their means and are in financial trouble. To grasp the significance of this, you need to understand that my sisters believe our parents are wealthy and expect to inherit everything when they pass away. As a result, they haven't been concerned about money. It turns out my parents aren't wealthy at all, which puts my oldest sister in serious financial trouble. Her family has maxed out credit cards and is behind on car leases, with one vehicle on the verge of repossession. Despite bragging about a high income, she actually earns much less than claimed. She confessed all this to Mom on Tuesday because they need a loan. To make matters worse, for the past 3 years, instead of using the vacation house regularly as intended, my oldest sister has been secretly renting it out for extra cash. She's been making significant amounts, charging over $2,000 for weekends and at least $4,000 for a week. With her cut off from using the house, she's already had to cancel bookings, fearing they'll lose everything. My parents can't afford to lend them money, and my other sister, who was aware of the rental scheme, likely did the same thing. I once encountered strangers claiming to stay at the house with my sister's family, assuming they were friends. Now I realize she might have been renting it out too. My parents are stressed, especially Mom, who feels deeply betrayed. Dad is mostly angry about the situation. He's hurt and embarrassed that he can't help his daughter. He's made it clear that the sisters won't be using the vacation home anytime soon, as far as he's concerned. My parents filled me in on what was happening because they anticipated my sisters would approach me next. And they were right. On Thursday, my sisters showed up at our place again, this time without their husbands, and waited outside until I got home. I faced a tough choice. Either argue with them in public, risk a scene if I entered without them, or let them in. Reluctantly, I decided to let them in. I listened to their bogus story, with the older sister and the younger one backing her up, about why they urgently needed to use the mountain house again. They also claimed I was a lousy brother and should plan on paying for their kids' college tuition, because that's supposedly what family does. I let them finish their pitch, then called them out based on what my parents had told me. Things quickly spiraled downhill from there, with denial, tears, curses, and shouting. My ears were ringing for days afterward. After about an hour, they finally left. I took a shower and laid down, only to find out from my wife that she had to block more phone numbers because my sisters were bombarding us with calls from new ones. The very next day, my parents informed me they were washing their hands of managing the vacation home. Essentially, they passed the responsibility onto me and said it was my problem from now on. Fed up with everything, I drove up to the vacation house and padlocked the entrance gate shut with a heavy-duty chain and lock. I'm the only one with a key, and I thought this would be enough to keep my siblings away, as they'd struggle to hike the 400 yards uphill to the house. I also took several additional security measures to safeguard the property. I reset all the door keypads, installed security cameras overlooking the valley, and added a heavy-duty lockout for the water shutoff and drain valve. I only confided in my wife about locking off the water supply, and we're the only ones with the keys. It's a good thing I took those security measures because a few days later, both of my sisters' husbands called me separately at my office, trying to convince me to let them use the vacation house as they always had. The older one had gone up with friends for a hangout but couldn't get in due to the gate lock. He was pretty upset and embarrassed about being locked out. During his call, he alternated between being pushy and playing the victim. At one point, he even threatened to tear the gate out of the ground. He also admitted they had been renting out the house to friends and claimed they needed the money. He accused me of ruining their business and demanded I refund their guests' money. The other brother-in-law seemed more like he was being forced to call by my sister. He didn't put up much of a fight when I told him they couldn't use the house anymore. I made it clear to both of them that they were not welcome to use the property again and not to ask again. To ensure they wouldn't try anything sneaky with the house, I hired someone to manage and oversee it. He has access to the camera feeds and conducts regular checks on the property. Additionally, he installed the camera near the entrance of the private road leading to the house, which takes still shots whenever a vehicle passes by. He sends these photos to everyone once or twice a week. As for my sisters and brothers-in-law, it seems like things were tense and strained at this time. My parents informed me that my oldest sister and her husband are making significant changes due to their financial situation. They're getting out of their SUV and big truck leases and selling off their jet skis and other unnecessary possessions. This adjustment will be tough for my sister, who often brags and values material possessions. Similarly, my brother-in-law's identity is closely tied to his truck, to the point where he even has a tattoo of the truck company's logo. This difference in priorities has always kept us from being close. Then things took a drastic turn when my two brothers-in-law made a decision that had severe consequences for them and my sisters. They broke into my vacation home and were subsequently arrested. They faced charges of breaking and entering, destruction of property, and communicating threats, all serious offenses. I refused to drop the charges against them, and they remained in jail as of the following day. I learned the full story afterward. On the Friday after Thanksgiving, my brothers-in-law went to my vacation home. Using an angle grinder, they cut through the chain on the driveway gate, damaging it in the process. They attempted to enter through the front door, damaging the lock and door in the process. Eventually, they gained access through the utility floor door and a locked internal door. They also broke into the barn for reasons unknown. When they attempted to leave through the front door, they were confronted by sheriff's deputies and David, the individual I hired to oversee the property. David received notifications from the camera system and alerted the sheriff's department. Despite the brothers-in-law's attempts to explain themselves, the deputies didn't buy it. Breaking into an empty house is a serious offense in that area, typically associated with criminal activity. Upon their arrest, my brothers-in-law reacted poorly, making threats against me in front of law enforcement. David and the sheriff's office attempted to contact my wife and me to determine our course of action, but we were spending time with her parents and had left our phones in the car to disconnect. Consequently, the authorities proceeded with booking the brothers-in-law on all charges, which aligned with my wishes. After their arrest, my brothers-in-law called their wives from jail, causing them to panic. They reached out to my parents and attempted to contact me, but their calls were blocked. They tried to find a lawyer to arrange bail, but it was challenging due to the rural area and the holiday weekend. My oldest sister had no cash, and her cards were maxed out, so if they made bail, my other sister would have had to foot the bill for both husbands. By the end of Friday, I contacted the sheriff's department to confirm that I wanted to press charges. On Saturday afternoon, I spoke with my parents, who were visibly shaken by the situation, especially my mom. My sisters had pressured them to convince me to drop the charges, but I firmly refused, stating that I wouldn't consider it until I spoke with an attorney and was compensated for the damages. Feeling awful about upsetting my mom, my dad suggested starting over completely but also insisted that my sisters and brothers-in-law should pay for the damage. I reached out to 2 attorney friends to recommend a lawyer to pursue legal action against my family members. The following week, I received a courier-delivered envelope at my office containing a signed letter from both brothers-in-law and a cashier's check for $5,000. In the letter, they sincerely apologized, admitted their wrongdoing, and offered to cover the damages, promising more if necessary. They also agreed to stay away from the vacation home unless specifically invited and requested that I work towards getting the charges dropped, as their jobs were at risk. They were open to a restraining order or any other measures necessary for resolution. This sudden change in behavior was shocking and unexpected. I had already scheduled a meeting with an attorney to pursue legal action, but I informed him of the letter and check, and he agreed to discuss it further at the end of the day. Instead of waiting until next week, my attorney advised me not to deposit the check from my brothers-in-law and met with me for about 2 hours. He recommended that my wife and I pursue a settlement and mutual release agreement with all 4 of them. He explained that although we would likely win a lawsuit against them, it could take years, involve significant upfront legal fees, and there was no guarantee we would recover any money. He also assured us that we could keep the $5,000 they offered, regardless of whether we pursued legal action. The agreement will include terms similar to a civil restraining order. I had already requested my property manager to estimate the cost of repairs, and I received the estimate promptly. It's expected to cost around $4,000, with most of the expense going towards repairing the front door. On Friday, my attorney contacted each of the brothers-in-law, advised them to seek legal representation, and they agreed. The middle brother-in-law explained they could only afford to pay for damages or a lawyer, not both. They believed hiring a lawyer wouldn't make a difference, given they had no defense for their actions. Their main concern was getting the charges dropped. My attorney also reached out to the district attorney's office to discuss dismissing the charges, but hasn't spoken to them yet. He believes they will likely dismiss the charges because the brothers-in-law are willing to pay for damages and have no prior criminal record. However, he advised me to be prepared to personally request dismissal if necessary. He also recommended maintaining no contact with my sisters and brothers-in-law, especially for the next 6 months, and emphasized the importance of adhering to the terms of the agreement in future interactions with them. It seems my brothers-in-law's change of heart stems from realizing the potential consequences, including legal fees, fines, and even the possibility of jail time, as well as the risk to one brother-in-law's security clearance. This settlement is their last-ditch effort to salvage their normal lives. On a personal note, receiving a written apology from them was unexpectedly significant for me. It marked a moment of closure I hadn't anticipated. It seems that the written apology from my brothers-in-law holds significant meaning for me, more so than the monetary compensation. Nonetheless, I'm grateful for the money, even though I suspect it came from my middle sister and her husband, as the cashier's check is from his company's credit union. Last week, I met with my attorney to finalize the agreement. We made a few minor adjustments, and he sent it to my sisters and brothers-in-law, including a provision that they cover my legal fees, which amounted to about $3,000. They weren't thrilled about it and attempted to negotiate, but my attorney stood firm, stating it was non-negotiable. He made it clear that if they didn't agree, we proceed with legal action against them. Additionally, he informed them that I would push hard with the DA's office to prosecute every charge. In the end, they agreed to the terms and signed the agreement, albeit in a tense atmosphere. The middle brother-in-law seemed to take charge and even threatened to walk away from the deal if my sisters didn't cooperate. They provided another cashier's check for $2,500, claiming it was all they could afford. Although it wasn't a full amount, we accepted it as final payment. According to my attorney, the signing was cold and curt, but they managed to keep it together long enough to finalize the agreement and leave without causing a scene. Yesterday, I visited the vacation house to assess the damage, which only fueled my anger further. The vandalism felt utterly senseless, and in the heat of the moment, I was ready to cover the repair costs and seek vengeance. However, after lunch, I visited the DA's office. Despite the initial wait, I met with the assistant DA, who informed me that since I didn't want to prosecute and the brothers-in-law had paid for damages, they were willing to drop all charges except for trespassing, which would be considered a Class 2 misdemeanor. The brothers-in-law would plead guilty and face whatever fine the judge deems appropriate. It's clear that any resistance from my brothers-in-law during their arrest would have significantly impacted the outcome. I've been advised that any further trouble from them, even a minor offense, could result in serious consequences. I made sure to express my gratitude to the sheriff's office for their prompt response, although I couldn't personally thank the deputies. I also attempted to reach David, the property manager, to express my appreciation, but was unsuccessful. Regarding the agreement, it includes a no-contact clause, stipulating that neither party can approach the other without prior agreement or legal representation present. They are allowed to keep the proceeds from renting the vacation house, though any tax implications will be their responsibility. Additionally, we release each other from any further liabilities up to the present moment. These are the main points of the agreement, and my wife and I will sign it later today. While I won't be able to discuss the details further, I can provide some general information